As part of our continued efforts to reach the African and other ethnic communities in the United Kingdom with greater impacts and create a platform to hear your silent and unheard views in this hugely growing community in the United Kingdom, our channel, Ben TV, presents to you another live current affairs television program. Our focus on the program is to review and discuss issues around the diaspora community in the UK. The program offers you that unrestricted voice on issues affecting you in the UK. Join us live every Monday at 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Another business segment of Dialogue in Diaspora. Thank you for joining us this morning, and it's Dialogue in Diaspora coming to you live from Ben Television. My name is Tunde Alabi. Thank you for being part of the program today. This morning, we'll be taking a look at the general elections coming up on the 8th of June in this country. We had the local council elections held just a couple of days ago, and the results actually have shown, well, a couple of parties not doing very well, while one party doing very well, gaining grounds. It's no news that the Conservative Party did gain quite a lot of councillorship, while the Labour Party lost a couple. The UKIP totally wiped out with just one councillor, and the Lib Dem, well, they lost a couple of seats and get a couple on the show today. And people have actually looked at that election. If that were to be a general election, what would the situation will be? It's probably looking at the forecast being given to us, Theresa May forming a majority government on the 9th of June. However, Jeremy Corbyn is not really under possibility and the chances of himself forming a party. But Theresa May has said Britain should avoid a coalition of people, parties that are not fit to govern the United Kingdom. So this morning, we're taking a look at the chances of the different political parties we have in forming a government come on the 9th of June. I'll be joined by two guests here in the studio. I've got one in the studio right now. My guest in the studio right now is James Torrance. James Torrance is an independent, standing as an independent candidate at the Kensington area here in London. James is a chartered accountant and he's done very well for himself, adding value to what the community is. He'll be joining us to review what is going on in Britain politically today. James, thank you for joining us on the program today.
No worries, pleasure to be here.
James, you've let's start with you. I mean, you are having a very blossoming career as a chartered accountant with MBA. Why would you want to go into politics? Why would you want to leave that then start fighting for causes?
It's not so much that I want to go into politics per se. It's more that I looked at the people I could have voted for at this election, and I was really upset that there was no candidate I could get excited about, and there was no sign of any candidates that I could get excited about. So I thought probably the best thing would be to give it a go myself. Let the people decide whether they agree with me, whether they want me to be representing them or not, and see where we go from there. In an ideal world, we'd all have great politicians that can represent us really well, and the rest of us can kind of get on with the rest of our lives. But at the moment, that's not the way it is.
You've lived in the Kensington area for about 30 years, and you're banking on that experience of knowing that terrain and area very well. I mean, one would say that is an area for the rich, for the wealthy, and normally one would say people in that area they are primarily conservative.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not just an area for the rich. There are areas in Kensington which have very, very wealthy populations, and there are areas in Kensington which have much less well-off populations. And I think one of the difficulties at the moment is the current MP probably represents the people towards the south of the constituency who tend to be much wealthier. She's in favour of Brexit, and I think that she's not representing the community as a whole. There are lots and lots of people in Kensington who live in social housing, who are reliant on benefits, who are not getting very much change out of this government. And I think that it's important that an MP in Kensington represents them, as well as representing the views of everybody else in the constituency, and in possibly some of the wealthier areas. So, you know, some of the people who contribute loads to the economy as well.
What are some of the views that you think are shaping your ideas in this election?
So I think it's really based around the government's attitude to Brexit. While 52% of the country have spoken, they're clearly in favour of Brexit. I think the way the government is approaching it is putting the economy at risk, and that means putting everybody's livelihoods at risk, creating the risk of unemployment and the risk of high inflation, which we're already seeing. And so I think by prioritising things like cutting down on immigration, which is the government's principal obsession basically, they're risking the economy and they're making life actually much worse for lots of people. And that's, I think, the thing that really needs to be challenged at the moment.
I mean, in the interview we just had with Theresa May, she has said her party is doing extremely very well for Britain. She needs the vote to strengthen her hands so that she can deliver the right negotiation for Britain. I mean, she looks at what her party has done and is doing and says, look, there can't be a better time for our party to be in power than now. We just said that in that interviews now.
Yeah, I think that's the really big risk in this election, is that Theresa May and the Conservative Party think that they win this election. The reality is that the Labour Party is losing this election. I think there are lots of seats across the country where former UKIP voters are coming back to the Conservatives, and so the Conservatives are taking a harder line, a more right-wing line, which is very disturbing for people like me and many people in Kensington and many people in London more broadly, and indeed across the country. I think the government needs people to stand up to it and to let them know that that isn't the way everybody thinks in this country, and that if they carry on down that line, they will probably lose elections later on.
I mean, saying that the Labour Party is losing, and I mean, we also heard Jeremy Corbyn saying the establishment, the media, they have written him off. They think elections or politics has rule and you've got to play by the rule. And that is not a man who plays by anybody's rule except the people's rule. Couldn't he be right? Why is everybody writing Jeremy Corbyn off?
Well, I think the country has written Jeremy Corbyn off, as we saw in the
Why
election.
why would we conclude that the country has written him off? I mean, twice he's got a huge chunk of his supporters electing and voting him as leader of the Labour Party.
Yeah, but you're talking about a couple of 100,000 people voting for him to be leader of the Labour Party.
And these are probably his foot soldiers that will be going out there campaigning for him door to door. And they comprise young people under the age of 30.
Oh yeah, but you need 100 times that many to actually go out and vote for you. If you can have 100,000 really, really ardent supporters, but if you don't have the millions of votes that you need to form a government, then you're never going to get there. No matter how kind of loving your supporters are towards you. And every time the Labour Party has been up at the ballot box while Jeremy Corbyn has been leader, the British people have given him the thumbs down, basically, as they did last week.
But what is it that is not appealing about him?
So there's a number of things. I think there are...
That someone like you feel is not making him appeal to you.
Yeah, well, I think his views on the economy, for example, he's very much in favour of state ownership of things, which in the experience in the UK tends to mean that those things fail. Whether it was British Leyland and the UK car industry back in the day, or a number of state-run enterprises recently, that's actually quite a bad idea. He also has a worrying history supporting the IRA in Northern Ireland, which I think should worry anybody who is in favour of the Northern Irish peace process. And he's got some very worrying views on Trident and renewing Britain's nuclear deterrent. I think those three things really turn people off about him.
We will be going back to the clip on Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May in a couple of minutes. Going back to those clips to hear their views about this general election again. But in the meantime, I'm still with James Torrens here, independent, for the Kensington area here. What about the Lib Dem? What chances do they have?
Well,
let me put that, yes.
Yeah, They're a difficult conundrum. The Lib Dems are really two parties in one. In some areas, they are almost to the left of the Labour Party traditionally, and in other areas, they're more moderate versions of the Conservative Party. And that creates really big problems for them, like you saw when they went into coalition with the Conservatives, and large numbers of their supporters were horrified. And I think a lot of their supporters still haven't really forgiven them for that. I supported the Liberal Democrats in 2010 when I was representing students at the University of Nottingham, because they promised not to oppose increases in tuition fees. Less than a year later, they changed their mind, and I felt very burnt by that, and I think lots of people still feel very burnt by that. So I think the Lib Dems might well do well. There are lots of people who oppose Brexit, and in many ways they have the clearest policy opposing Brexit, but they also have some major weaknesses which I don't think they'll be able to overcome at this election.
What are the main factors you think would determine this election? Brexit, or the economy, or the NHS?
I think it's all wrapped up in one, but I think really Brexit is going to determine.
Now, if Brexit is going to be the case, 48% of people in Britain voted against Brexit, and the latest poll has shown that has grown significantly. More people have actually come to believe that Brexit was a mistake. Could that not lead to Jeremy Corbyn and Tim Farron catching in on this?
Well, firstly,
to swell up their votes.
Yeah, I mean, one of the problems is Jeremy Corbyn doesn't himself believe that Brexit was a mistake. It's pretty clear from the way the Labour Party has dealt with Brexit since the referendum that many of their MPs, many of their supporters are kind of okay with Brexit. I think it could work well for Tim Farron, but they've got other problems as well, which will hurt them in constituencies like Kensington, and I'm sure it will hit them in other constituencies around the country.
All right. A colleague of ours had an interview with Tim Farron over the weekend. We'll be playing you that interview in the course of this program, an extensive interview with Tim Farron. I do hope we do have that interview. We'll be bringing it to you with the Lib Dem leader, Tim Farron. In the course of this program, we'll present to you that interview, and also we'll be going back to some of the interviews with Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May in the course of this program, so we can actually get their views further on what they excuse me, what they represent. James, now you believe that the Conservative, not really because of some of their views on Brexit and Europe, not really the party that should form the government, but you think because of what Jeremy Corbyn represents, a very hard view on a couple of issues, might not form the government. The Lib Dem as well. So who do you think should form the government? Not because you seem to have written of all the three major parties now.
I think in many ways it's, not being a candidate to form a government myself, I think Theresa May is the least worst option of the different possibilities. That makes me very sad.
Is it because she's riding on a very high wave of probably high rates of popularity now that you think she may get into power?
Realistically,
or because of some of the policies she represents, or who she represents?
I think it's because all three major leaders, I think, represent a threat to the economy at the moment. I think the threat that Theresa May poses is possibly the least. I think Jeremy Corbyn would...
With all the millions of costs that have been imposed on the British people, you think so?
Yeah, I think it's sad that we're in this position, but I think that is the case. I think Jeremy Corbyn would lay waste to the British economy, and I think Tim Farron, the Liberal Democrats realistically are not about to form the next government, but I think Tim Farron and would be subject to a lot of the same demands that Jeremy Corbyn is subject to. You'd see increases in tax, you'd see large increases in public spending that we can't afford, and you'd see some real threats to the economy from that. I think, it pains me to say it, but I think of those three, Theresa May is both the most likely and the best suited to be Prime Minister, though we need some better options, frankly.
All right, well, we need to go on a short break now. If we can get the clips of any of these leaders, either Tim Farron or Jeremy Corbyn or even Theresa May. We'll bring them to you right away as we go on a short break to bring in my a guest who will be joining us on the program. Don't go away. Deliver best Brexit deals ahead of the June 8th elections. While addressing supporters at a rally, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn said that a vote for him and Labour is a vote for a government that provides for all and not just a few people.
And that is very clear. That, let's look, the other parties are lining up to prop up Jeremy Corbyn. We've seen it with the Liberal Democrats, and we see it with Nicola Sturgeon's Scottish nationalists. They're very clear that they want to do everything they can to frustrate our Brexit negotiations, to undermine the job that we have to do, the task that lies ahead, do everything to stop us from being able to take Britain forward. And it's their tunnel vision, focus on independence, that actually provides uncertainty. They want to pull the strings, try to pull the strings of this election, prop up Jeremy Corbyn, and provide more risk and uncertainty for the British people, and that's not in Britain's interests. So it's only a vote for the Conservatives that can deliver, and every vote for the Conservatives, every vote is a vote for me and local Conservative candidates, and it's a vote to ensure that we have that strong and stable leadership that we need to take us through Brexit and beyond. Every vote for me and the local Conservative candidates here and across Britain is a vote to deliver on that plan for a stronger Britain and a more secure future for us all.
The Labour Party that's standing up for working people to improve the lives of all. It's the establishment versus the people. It's our historic duty to make sure the people prevail. And as Ian explained, a duty for all of us here today, the duty of every Labour MP, a duty of our 500,000 members, including, and I welcome them, the 2,500 who've joined in the last 24 hours. Much of the media and the establishment are saying this election is a foregone conclusion. They think there are rules in politics which, if you don't follow by doffing your cap to the powerful people, accepting that things can't really change, then you can't win. But of course, they do not want us to win, because when we win, it is the people, not the powerful, who win. The nurse, the teacher, the small trader, the carer, the builder, the office worker, the student, the carer win. We all win. It's the establishment that complains, I don't play by the rules, by which they mean their rules. We can't win, they say, when we don't play their game. We don't fit in their cosy club. We're not obsessed with the tittle-tattle of Westminster or Brussels. We don't accept that it is natural for Britain to be governed by a ruling elite, the city and the tax dodgers. We don't accept that the British people...
All right, you're welcome back from that break. I'm now joined by Luigi Billi. Luigi Billi is the leader, representatives of the Italian community here in the United Kingdom. Billi, thank you for joining us and welcome back to Ben TV again. It's been a long time we had you on the show. Thanks for coming back. All right, I see I have James Lawrence in the studio. Billi, let me start with you. I mean, first, let's take the news coming in from Europe. From last night, the victory of the 39 years old centrist candidate Emmanuel Macron becoming the youngest president in France. He won that poll after a hard-fought battle with the right, far right candidate Marine Le Pen with 66.26%. What are your thoughts?
Well, that was an interesting election, actually. So, I have to say it is bit of fresh air for the European community. As we all know, Macron stood specifically on Europe. He was the candidate for Europe, and he was, in a way, rewarded or taking that stance in that position, surely more than the Lebanese stuff, I mean, as Marine Le Pen. And he won fair and square. I mean, he got nearly 66% of the votes.
Total votes.
So no, the French people decided to go for a different Europe other than walking out.
I mean, this morning, what leaders actually expressed concern about the rising trends of right-wing politicians' views across the world.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have to take this into consideration. You know, if you look into what has been going on, you know, all throughout the world, as you said, you know, well, I wouldn't say the far right. It's populism, which is slightly different. Populism is a different breed of politicians. You know, they talk to people, they think that they're close to the people, but there's also quite a lot of rhetoric and demagogy into that. I mean, if you think about here, the referendum with £350 million on the NHS and so on, you know, I'm not going to get that because, you know, I respect the decision of the British people. And but that's what means populism, you know, sometimes is to go outside the real world and talking to the mouth of people, what people want to listen to. And that is the success of populism. That's what is going to happen, you know, that was happening. And we have to take really we have to look carefully into that because, you know, that might lead to very difficult circumstances.
James, I mean, earlier on before, but while we were talking on the show, I mean, you spoke about the supporters of UKIP coming over to the Conservative Party, probably swelling the rise of right-wing opinions and views, and you had this concern. How much effect do you think this could have on British politics? Well, I think with the concern world leaders had today about, hang on, how did it come to this level where somebody like Marine Le Pen suddenly rose to become a firebrand in French politics?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it could have a huge impact on British politics because there are many parliamentary seats across the country where UKIP votes are maybe the difference between a Labour MP and a Conservative MP. And if the UKIP vote moves back to the Conservatives, then you will end up with lots and lots of Conservative MPs coming into Parliament after the election who are there because of UKIP votes. They will say to Theresa May, we got elected because you convinced UKIP voters to come back to the Conservative Party. And they know that they have to represent those UKIP voters in order to hold on to them. And those UKIP is relatively far right. They are very populist. Well, you're absolutely right. Yeah. But they're populist at the right wing end of the spectrum, and that's very concerning.
I mean, we just heard Theresa May saying, look, the British people need to strengthen our hand to get a good negotiation for Britain. Now, if she gets elected on the back of UKIP voters, I mean, giving our votes, our party vote, what impact could that have on Brexit negotiation?
I think it just makes a hard Brexit even more likely, very, very likely at this stage. Everything that she's said, everything that she's done, from Brexit means Brexit, which means nothing, to no deal is better than a bad deal, all pushes you to the stage where you can't have a full negotiation. There is no deal to be done. And the result of that is a hard Brexit where the UK washes its hands of the EU and leaves. And I think that would really please many UKIP voters. It would really please many Conservative voters as well. and I think it would really damage the economy. That's going to be really troubling.
Before we go to Tim Farron, we'll be hearing from Tim Farron just in a moment. We just heard from Jeremy Corbyn. We've heard from Theresa May. We'll be hearing from Tim Farron just in a moment. Before really quickly,
May I say something on what
yeah,
James
go on,
just said?
go on.
You know, I don't think the UKIP vote in terms of parliamentary seats will have an impact. You know, as you know, they just added 1 MP. So although they had 3 million votes, I mean, obviously that's surely
So
it's a force. But in terms of seats, you know, it's irrelevant.
But if
because, you
those
know,
3 million votes go to the Conservative,
well, it already happened. If we look, you know, the administrative vote, you know, the local elections, you know, they lost all the seats, retaining just 1 seat out of 146. So they went to the Conservative, obviously, party. Now, I think, you know, the ticking point really is how much is going to hold the Labour, and whether, you know, there's somehow, particularly in London, where the vote is being polarised, you know, the referendum vote, you know, is being polarised, you know, between London and part of Wales, whether the Conservative vote will shift into the Lib Dem, because it might be an opportunity, as the Lib Dem, you know, they've always been pro-Europe, keen into Europe. So London is pro-Europe. It's been mainly pro-Europe. So that might be the UKIP. You know, is, I think, you know, the British people realise, you know, what the UKIP party is, and it's all rhetoric, as I said before. The Magaji talking about nonsense. There's no politics into that. They're trying. It was just now Farage, Mr. Farage, just talking to the people of what they wanted to listen to. You know, and that's where they went that far.
Had Marine Le Pen won this election with Brexit, what could it mean for Europe?
Well, Marine Le Pen is a different politician from the UKIP politicians. She's a well-established politician. She's got a family history of politics. The National Party has been there for a long time as a far-right party. So she is a very, I mean, she made a mistake on the last fight, you know, TV fight, you know, yeah, well, call it fight because it was a real fight with Macron. He lost there, and I think, you know, lots of votes shift upon the debate. Yeah. So I don't think there's an equal.
Had she won this election?
Had she won this election, it would be, I think it would have been the end of the European project, or possibly. And the thing is, you know, you don't realise how much impact has upon our lives, you know, the European Union. Once you, like in the United Kingdom, you start pushing the button. And there you go, you know, we got 27 countries there, 1 country here, then if, and there's lots of complexity into the negotiations. To wipe out 40 years of living together is not an easy, I mean, it's a divorce, I don't know. Standard divorce is just a complex, you know, situation. Put it out between countries, I think is more complex. I said, well, France would have been possibly an ode to the European project, which is, well, I think it would have been a pity, as I've been always, well known my pro-European position.
James, a couple of days ago, Theresa May did accuse the European Union president of attempting to meddle into British politics and influence it by a couple of hard utterances from the president. Do you see, what do you make of that comment?
Well, I think it demonstrates perfectly how poorly Theresa May understands the reality of European politics. Firstly, if Jean-Claude Juncker wanted to interfere in the British election, the only thing that he did last week was interfere on Theresa May's behalf, because you know, he's not a popular politician in the UK.
Neither Europe.
Yes, neither in Europe. He's not a popular politician in the UK, and what he said will make lots of people go, right, well, I don't want to be part of that gang then. And that's so, you know, if he's interfering, he's helping Theresa May. I think what actually happened was he was trying to communicate to the German politicians, to French politicians, to rally a European position, and it's actually a perfectly understandable European position. You know, Jean-Claude Juncker does not want the UK to benefit from Brexit, because if people see the UK benefiting from Brexit, then other people will think it's a good idea too. I think that's a perfectly understandable position for him. Theresa May played the British politics perfectly.
With that state of mind, that look, it's not likely we'll make Britain benefit from this exit. Does it mean that Britain is likely to have a very unfriendly negotiation?
I think the way they're going at the moment, negotiations will be very unfriendly, and I think it's going to be very, very difficult to get a deal that allows us to benefit from Brexit compared to the deal we had, which was actually a very privileged deal.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right.
We had a great deal when we were members.
I'll say the Eurozone, retaining the immigration status as outside the Schengen, so people were still showing the passport. Exactly.
We had a financial rebate that is great. We had very privileged access.
Billy, my question to you is, I mean, you are pro-Euro, obviously. And, I mean, I did say to James earlier on that quite a lot of people had actually come, I mean, by opinion poll, have actually come to conclude that, hang on a minute, Brexit was a mistake. And if people were to be given a second chance, they probably would not be voting for Brexit. Do you think this could change the course of this general election? The rise of people seeing Brexit as a mistake and saying, look, let's vote for more pro-Europe MPs. Could that change the course of this election?
Well, I mean,
again,
I'll pull out the rhetoric of the politicians, you know, into action. The thing is, if Theresa May and other conservatives start behaving as Donald Trump, I rather prefer the original one, if you know what I mean with that. So they're going to lose, and I think Marine Le Pen made that mistake, that fatal mistake, to blame Macron on the basis of Donald Trump attitude, on a Donald Trump attitude. So I don't think that would work, because, you know, British people are certainly more ascertaining, you know, in their opinions. I feel that they know more than some rhetoric politicians, you know, think about. So, in other words, that would change. Yeah, I think so.
If people decide to vote more pro-EU MPs like James here, what could it mean for the?
Well, as I said, you know,
Labour, Conservative,
in one way, Jeremy Corbyn, who is, in my view, just making things wrong.
I'm going to ask you why. Why does everybody keep criticizing?
Well,
why do you
because,
think?
You know, you have to have
Is it because the media is saying this, or because we've seen him his action?
Well, let me tell you why. Because I mean, I'm pro-European because I've got a vision of Europe, not because, you know, just woke up, and because, you know, I was born with the idea of being part of Europe, and I've got the freedom the freedom I had in the last 30 years of walking around every single corner of Europe. I don't want to undermine that to my children. I want them to experience the same, because I think that is a great opportunity, and it is a richness in the relationships. And beside that, I think, you know, that Jeremy Corbyn hasn't got this kind of holistic or worldwide or wide view, and is just showing a bit of provincialism, I'd say that. Just, okay, fine, you have to focus on the internal policies, you know, which is the NHS, fair enough, you know, we have to look into that carefully. the economy. But when you step into the economy and taxation, yes, you have to consider the Brexit. There's no question about. I mean, I don't think the 100 billions euros, which is an 80 billions bill, would be beneficial. Well, you have to look, what is in there. So, and ascertain what are the money that you have to pay. Frankly, I think, I will end up these negotiations straight away, because, I would say the option of Norway and Switzerland straight away. And just being in the part, in the big market of the world, and having, the freedom that I had, and give to my children the same freedom, but being outside and enjoy the rest of the world. So I think that would be...
My question still remains now, if people decide to vote pro-EU MPs, having the feeling that Brexit was a mistake, and so we know Brexit has happened, we've got to respect that. However, let's vote in people. They say we want to vote in people who are pro-EU, so that they can get
Tunde, we have to analyze the
What could that mean? What will that mean to the three parties?
Yeah, if we analyze carefully the last local election, that tells you that the Conservative Party just gained the vast majority of the seats. They gained 538.
Can we use that as a yardstick to measure the general election?
Indeed, yeah, it could be, because if you think about these seats being gained in areas where, well, frankly, the UKIP, where there were a few 146 seats, but the Labour Party lost 382 seats. Even the Lib Dem, which I thought they were doing, perhaps they were walking on the Europe, they lost 36 seats. They lost. Even the...
But that was a local election.
Well, it's a local election, I know.
With
but
few voters,
at the end of the day,
votes.
Local election, if I'm an MP and I've got the councillors who campaign for me, so it's it might have an impact. But if the council is different, then I might have a problem with it. So the politics is all it's not rocket science, really. It's all to do with consent of people. And you have to realise that the more people you have on your side, the more votes you get. Politics is about numbers at the end of the day. And I'm not being cynical with that, but I mean, that's...
James, I'm going to ask you the same question. If people decide to vote pro-EU MPs like you, what will it mean for the parties? Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem. Lib Dem is absolutely pro. They've made their stand known. We are pro-EU. And if people say, okay, we want to vote in more pro-EU MPs,
I think that would really send the message to the Conservative Party that they are not representing the whole country. They're representing a very small proportion of the country. Not only, they're not even representing the 52%, they're representing the maybe 10 or 15% who really want a hard Brexit. And that if they get it wrong, people across the country will eventually vote for pro-EU MPs or will vote against the Conservative Party. And that will maybe make them think, actually, we need to shift our perspective a little bit and bring it back round to something closer to a Norway or Switzerland deal. I think that's likely to happen in relatively few areas. I hope it happens in Kensington. But unfortunately, the Liberal Democrats haven't performed very well. Their election campaign hasn't been great, and they had a bad result last week. But I think you're right, there are more people who are starting to realise the costs of leaving the European Union, and the costs that we're already facing and already hitting us, and that gradually you will see more pro-EU MPs and more openly pro-EU MPs.
All right, let's quickly go to Tim Farron. Midweek we had an interview with Tim Farron, Prisoner Whipple, by NTV, and here is what he had to say on the general elections. We'll come back, and my guests are still in the studio. Billy Luigi is still in the studio, the leader of representatives of the Italian community, huge number of the Italian community in the United Kingdom. We'll be back.
The biggest problem that the Lib Dems had was on the tuition fees. Now, here we are, snap general election is an opportunity for you to regain ground. How is the party going to be able to regain grounds from the huge loss that occurred over that period?
Well, I think, first of all, the 2010-15 government was the first peacetime coalition for 80 years. And so it was something that many people didn't understand at the beginning, quite understandably that they didn't understand it. And yet what we've seen the 2 years since it ended is what happens in a Conservative Party that governs on its own, and the increasing division in this country, the reduction in the amount of money we're spending on health and social care, on education, on police, and that division that's followed the catastrophe, in my opinion, of the Brexit referendum last June just shows how right the Liberal Democrats were to prevent those things when we were in government.
Now, you say prevent those things. I don't have time to go into that now, so let me move on very quickly. Now, how are we going to get enough candidates in place for the Liberal Democrats? Because, this is a snap general election. Is the party ready to be able to have sufficient candidates in place to go forward?
I think we're much more ready than any other opposition party, because we thought there might be an early election. I wasn't certain of it, but we prepared for one. So we had candidates selected last autumn and a manifesto all but written last autumn. And that meant that great people like Amna Ahmad, who we've been with tonight, who's our candidate for the very winnable seat of Sutton Cheam, as an example of us being much more prepared and more diverse. But we're going to do a lot more. Last September at our party conference, at my request, we passed a motion called Electing Diverse MPs, and that's exactly what it intends to do. And it's about making sure that we change the way we select candidates, particularly our most winnable seats, so that we have a much better representation of BAME communities, but also better gender balance.
Okay. One of the other issues going forward, huge issue, Brexit. I know that the Lib Dems are saying we'll have another referendum and so on. Do you really think that at this time, everybody seems to be going along with we must exit? Do you really think the populace are going to buy into yet another referendum?
Well, look, this isn't about today, this is about tomorrow. And I need to be able to look my kids in the eye in 10, 20, 30 years' time, and my grandchildren, if I've got any by then, and be able to tell them that I did absolutely everything I could to prevent Britain becoming an isolated, mean, more divided place. And I think Britain can be better than the direction Theresa May is taking us in. So if you believe that Britain is better off in the European Union, then we have to accept the only way we're staying is via a democratic means. And given that the government is proposing to stitch up a deal that no one's voted for on the British people in the next 2 years and make us all live with it whether we like it or not, I don't think it's undemocratic for us to say the British people should have the final say on that deal. Now, if they like that deal, then yes, we leave on those terms. But if they don't like that deal, then we vote to remain. And that means the Liberal Democrats are, for those of us who think Britain's future could be better and different than this, and believe that Britain could actually still be in the European Union in the future, we really are your only hope.
Okay, I know we're done, but your final word, why should we vote for you?
Because Britain can be better than this, because Britain can be diverse and tolerant, because Britain needs politicians who are brave enough to say that immigration is a blessing to Britain and not a curse.
All right, we'll come back from that interview. What do you make of that interview, Luigi?
Well, I did find that interesting to say I'm not in favour of another referendum, because you have to take the decision of the British people as it is and accept that, work with it. But it is also true what he said, that once the negotiations have been all done and that there's a deal on the table, whether it's no deal or whether it's a sort of deal, no one knows, they haven't got a clue, we haven't got a clue neither. So once we have that on the table, ask the British people whether that deal is good for them. I think that is as an interesting point.
James?
Yeah, I think at the moment there doesn't seem to be any sign that the Liberal Democrats would be able to win such a referendum. And that, I think, makes it a bit of a nonsense policy, really. The key thing is to make sure there is a substantive vote in Parliament. In 5 or 10 years' time, when we are absorbing the costs of leaving the European Union, I want to be able to go around to every single of the 600, 650 MPs there are and say, did you think this was a good deal or not? And to know, based on how they voted in Parliament. Because I think that's how we hold them to account when we inevitably absorb the cost.
What about deal, whoever wins the next election is coming, is still going to be put before the Parliament for their consent on election, would that change anything? Good, bad, hurdle? James, let's start with you. Can I start with James?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think it does make a difference, because it means that an individual MP has to sit and look at the details of the deal in front of them, which most people in the country won't have the time or the energy to do themselves, and to say, do I think this is the right deal for the country, and to make a decision for themselves. And I think that's exactly the way our democracy is supposed to work, and that's how you hold them to account afterwards if it ends up being a bad deal. I think it will make them stop and think, and it will allow us to hold them to account properly. At the moment, they're just going, well, 52% said we should leave, therefore I don't have to take any responsibility for it. I want them to show some leadership.
Billy?
Yeah, well, no, I agree with what James just said. Although I still think that what Farron said, is it's actually a good idea, because I think people need to have another chance, but not of whether they're going to stay or remain in Europe. I think that is wrong. But whether that deal is actually good for the British people or no, that deal has been negotiated by the Conservative Party.
But eventually that deal is coming to the Parliament.
Well,
Does it
that's
really
true.
matter whether MPs will vote on it or not?
That is true. But as we all know now, in an intelligent way, Theresa May decided to have a snap election for that purpose, to have a vast majority in the Parliament, and therefore to be able to take that decision with confidence, which tells me that the Conservative Party will be a dominant side in the decision, the parliamentary decision. Likely. I agree with you. I agree. Nothing is decided in politics. Absolutely right.
Nobody actually predicted Brexit. Nobody predicted
No,
Donald Trump.
I would never do that myself.
So what if the media is actually wrong, and what we're saying is actually wrong on Jeremy Corbyn? What if on the 8th of June, the people go out there to say, you know what? We want to prove you guys wrong.
Well,
James, okay. Go on, Billy.
Jeremy Corbyn is in another, in the past world. It is, people haven't gone into terms that he's a socialist. He was against Europe in the 1970s, so it is, and he's kept performing, with the same old. Cauliflower cheese, that it just the world is changing, and with a very fast pace, and he can't keep on with it. It's as simple as that. I mean, I'm not going to get into more details to say, even McDonald was asked yesterday, but can't keep on with it.
So the chances that people are going to wake up changing their minds?
Well, the reason, because, plenty of Labour consent has been lost is due to him. And in a balance, in a politics where there's a balance, where you've got the opposition that keep pressure on the government, it's not going to happen. Because,
I mean, if I wake up on June the 9th and Jeremy Corbyn is Prime Minister, I will be astonished. But, I mean, stranger things have happened. I would be very worried as well. I think we would be in a very, very, the worst of all possible worlds in many ways. He's probably not in favour of staying in the European Union, as his deeply lacklustre performance during the referendum demonstrated. He doesn't have the support of his party, although I suspect if he is Prime Minister by then that might have changed. But again, we had John McDonnell yesterday. He was talking about economic policy, and he says we have a lot to learn from reading Das Kapital. And you're like, okay, well, every time the policies of Das Kapital have been put into practice, people have died as a result. But you were absolutely right. Jeremy Corbyn is a man who made up his mind in the 1960s and 70s and hasn't changed it since. I don't think he's ready for a modern world at all.
Chances of a coalition, James?
Slim, I think.
If people say we're not giving any party any majority for anything, sort it out, coalition. And then we have Labour, Lib Dem, and then we have SNP.
I think that would be really challenging, because I think the one thing that the Liberal Democrats learnt at the last coalition is that at the end of it they get hammered. And so they wouldn't go into coalition with the Conservatives.
And Tim Farron says he's not ready for any coalition. But if that happens and no single party is able to form a government, and probably the party with the highest MP, probably Labour, needs a coalition followed. I mean, Labour will not go into coalition with the Conservative. They'll probably need SNP or they leave them.
Yeah. I mean, I think the SNP, they might enter a coalition, but again, they actually disagree with Jeremy Corbyn on many things themselves. They are, they're pro-independence. He's not. They're very pro-remaining in the EU, and he is not. And those are two huge issues that a potential coalition would have to deal with.
Yeah, I agree with James. Well, the thing is, that the Lib Dem, that Farron, he hasn't got, I think, that quick, that can shift, the votes of the Labour into the Lib Dem, because that would have kept the current balance, and would have been a failure for Theresa May to have called a snap election. The votes of the Labour dragged into the Lib Dem, so few of the constituency, pro-European constituency that they had, Conservative MP, they were shifting, as it happened in Richmond, into the Lib Dem. But unfortunately, it's not happening that. I mean, as I said, the local election is a clear example of what perhaps is going to be a landslide, for the Conservative on the next, on the 8th of June.
And that's precisely why I decided to run as an independent in Kensington.
That's a good idea.
One of those constituencies where, if I found support on the doorstep for the Liberal Democrats, then I would have gone, okay, I won't take any time off work. I will just let them through. But there's no enthusiasm for the Liberal Democrats in Kensington, and there's very little enthusiasm for the Liberal Democrats elsewhere. Even in Richmond, where they won just a few months ago, they're now under threat from exactly the same MP again.
Yeah.
I think that's really worrying.
Zach,
That's right. If you're watching this program wherever you are, you can join us, and the number to call is going to be put on the screen. You can join us in the discussion wherever you are across Europe. If you're calling outside the UK, you put +44 to be part of the discussion. If you're within UK, just call straight to the studio. Wherever you are, you can be part of the discussion. You can tweet us, you can email, and you can WhatsApp, send whatever message you're able to get through your message to my guest in the studio. I'm still joined by Legio Bilewu. He's the leader and representatives of the Italian community in the United Kingdom. And of course, I've got James in the studio, standing as independent candidate MP for the Kensington area, all giving their opinion and thoughts on the program today. We've also heard from the leaders of the three major political parties. We've heard from Theresa May in the course of this program. We've heard from James Jeremy Corbyn and also Tim Farron, all giving us reasons why they should be given the opportunity to form the government come on the 9th of June. What do you think? Where do you think it's going to go? You can call in and let's have your opinion. James, as we look down to round of this program, do you see Europe still standing in under 5-10 years?
Well, I think now that Emmanuel Macron has won his election, I think you have to say yes. They've gone through some big challenges over the last 5 or 10 years with Greece, with the various issues in the Eurozone, but they're getting gradually to the other side of it. And Emmanuel Macron is really, I think, the demonstration that they're starting to move forward. I think he's got some parliamentary elections coming up that are going to make life a little bit difficult for him, but I think that means that 5-10 years' time, Europe has weathered an enormous storm over the last 5-10 years, and I think they should be better off over the next 5 to 10.
Billy?
Well, I agree with James, although I'm a bit sceptical on how the direction Europe is going. The bureaucrats, they need to be, we have to reform Europe. Now, Macron, it's not because Europe is safe. Yes, Macron is pro-European. The Merkel is, in Germany, is going pro-Europe as well as, the Merkel won, one of the regions which generally were with the SDP, the Social Democrats. So it is going towards the European direction. But Europe needs a serious reform, and if Macron, as well as all the other politicians, don't take into account the Le Pen increase, all the populism that is is moving on as well, then that is a fatal mistake. And perhaps, you know, in less than 10 years, there might be a different shift into different direction. And that's what worries me. This is the time, not for complacency, but it's time to roll the sleeves and get on with the work. And the work is to reform Europe, because the way is now it reached a point that it needs to change, to adapt to the new modern times, to the paces going the world, and that is a must now. So that's what I think about Europe. Yes, yeah, it's a good incentive, but hold on, let's move on and reform Europe now.
We're going to a break in a minute, but before we go, let me ask you, with Brexit, and a very hard Brexit, what would say the European Union would not want Brexit to succeed, would not want Britain to succeed, but should Britain succeed on a global level outside the EU, would that not fuel the call for other nations to say, look at Britain, they're doing very well outside
Tandy, I know where you're leading to, and I can anticipate the end of your question. Well, the point is you have to analyze the economic trends first, and you have to say, okay, fine. We have to, do you want to enter in an agreement with Mugabe? Well, you scratch your head and say, right, okay, maybe. That might be a good deal. Do you want to do other... So where is the money? Where is the market? If I was Theresa May, I will ask that question.
I'll put it on hold there. Where is the money? Where is the market? We'll start from there when we come back from that break. I need to go on a short break now. We'll be back after this break.